morning. This is Omar Mohammed, and this is our 36 minutes on antisemitism, a podcast produced by the program on extremism at George Washington University. And we are also accompanied today by one of our fellows, who is an expert on the right wing in the United States, as we are going to discuss today the right wing and antisemitism, which is a very big problem, not only in the United States, but also across the globe. Jon, welcome.
Thank you, Omar. It's wonderful to be here.
Would you like to introduce yourself to our audience?
Absolutely. I am a research fellow with the program on extremism at George Washington University. I have largely focused on the far-right extremist threat landscape, with a particular focus in white supremacist and anti-government movements, as well as the evolution of specific groups and federal responses to that threat.
Thank you for joining us, Jon. As I usually do with every episode, I ask the question because I believe it's very important to establish the foundation of the discussion about antisemitism, which is, what is the definition of antisemitism?
Absolutely. I think, quite simply, it's hatred of Jews, of the Jewish people. I would largely hew to the State Department definition, as previous guests have stated, which does really focus in on those manifestations of anti-Semitism, whether it's physical, online, offline, which are expressions of hate, expressions of anti-Semitism directed either at Jewish or non-Jewish individuals, institutions, religious facilities. But I think, it's quite simple when you really boil it all down. It's hatred of the Jewish people.
As we are focused on the right wing today, Jon, I think it's very important for us to establish a context. I mean, what is the right wing in the United States? Who are they? What's happening there?
So I would first, of course, have to contextualize this and say that given the unique protections on speech, on assembly in the United States, we have a very difficult threat landscape when we talk about right-wing extremism. There is, of course, no legal challenges to being an extremist, whether it's right-wing, left-wing, or just an anti-Semitic extremist of any kind. But when we attempt to bucket, or as we see the government definitions attempt to trace the groups that are present here, what we really see are white supremacist movements, which are largely, in this modern era, largely post-organization, really decentralized, disparate online networks of racist, anti-Semitic individuals who form these coalitional movements, both across the country and transnationally. And along with the white supremacist, or what the government calls racially and ethnically motivated violent extremism, or REMV, they also speak extensively on anti-government, anti-authority violent extremism, or agave, as the government definition really lays out there. And so what we've seen, especially in this post-Oklahoma City bombing, post-9/11 landscape, is a blurring of those ideological lines. As we've seen the formalized groups fade away out of the public spaces, we see a blurring where white supremacist, anti-government individuals may intersect, may form these coalitions. They will pull in a wide variety of like-minded individuals, whether it's individuals who identify as incels, or members of the Boogaloo movement, or any of these various brands that have come to take up space in this American far right, whether it's the Goyim Defense League, Blood Tribe, Active Clubs, White Lives Matter. These are all, hardly organizations, but they're symptoms of the disease, right? And they show, I think, how far-reaching the anti-Semitic, hateful core of this ideology has spread across the country.
Jon, what was the state of anti-Semitism among these? I mean, I understand that most of them have anti-Semitism at the foundation of their ideology. But what was the situation of anti-Semitism among these groups before October 7? I ask this question because I need to understand later on what happened after October 7.
Absolutely. I think it's hard to look at right-wing extremism in the United States without stumbling upon some anti-Semitic conspiracy when you look at many of the deadliest acts of mass violence that have been perpetrated by right-wing extremists in this country in recent years, whether we're talking about the Tree of Life synagogue in Pittsburgh, whether we're talking about the shooting at the synagogue in Poway, whether we're talking about the mass shooting in El Paso in 2019 or the Top supermarket in Buffalo in 2022. The commonality across all of those shootings is anti-Semitic conspiracies. It's deeply hateful conspiracies like the Great Replacement Theory, which posits that globalists, in quotes, which obviously refers to Jews, refers to the deep state, and connects them up and argues that there is this global conspiracy to replace the white Christian population in this country with non-white immigrants. And at the center of each and every one of those conspiracies, inevitably, is Jews, is a hatred of Jews, is connecting immigration to George Soros, is arguing that somehow, Jewish aid organizations that are attempting to help immigrants are part of this conspiracy. And so no matter how far out you go, at the core of nearly every single one of these acts of hatred, as the mobilizing concepts that inspire so many individuals to fall down that rabbit hole into right-wing violent extremism, the hatred of the Jews, hatred of Jewish people, is almost always at the core of those movements. And I think it's important to say that even when anti-Semitism is not the primary driver, the most overt manifestation of that group's purpose, you still see anti-Semitic conspiracies creeping in, even if it's just passive. When you look at a group like the Oath Keepers, for example, you see many of their conspiracies talking about this globalist deep state, this new world order, the Zionist occupied government. And that's language that is not out of place in the most overt neo-Nazi, anti-Semitic online and offline spaces that we've seen become so popular in recent years.
You mentioned the Zionist occupying government. It's also important to mention here that I remember when I was talking to my students about the conspiracy theories of also jihadist groups, Al-Qaeda also does believe in the Zionist occupying government, or the abbreviation ZOG. How did the situation change post October 7? Or I think the question should be, what was the response of the right-wing extremist groups to October 7?
So early on, what you saw was a very concerning trend of glorification and celebration of mass brutal violence against Jews.